Hello, my friends. This is Lynda Lippin, and welcome to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome back one more time to the Pilates Goddess podcast. I have to thank all of you who are listening, rating, and reviewing. We are almost at 10,000 downloads for the podcast, and it's only been about 6 months. So I'm really excited about all of that. And I thank everybody for all of the support. Now, guys, you know that I'm a huge fan of science and facts. And you all also know, if you've been listening to me for a while and following me on social media, that I have very little tolerance for false statements and for really bad science. And I told you guys a story last week that I'll actually tell again later on in the episode with my guest. But that absolutely horrified me in terms of the factual information that colleagues of mine were giving to younger teachers and newer teachers in a Facebook group. And it was clearly, stuff that they had maybe Googled. But as we're going to find out today, using the regular search engines for discovering actual facts and science is not the best. It is not the best thing to do. It's not the best way to go. Your first few pages are just full of sponsored ads and bullshit, basically. So I am thrilled today, actually, to welcome Eric Olson. Eric's company is called Consensus, and it is actually a search engine that only gives you the scientific studies and the facts. So it is completely useful for me and other people like me, and should be useful for you. Eric is a talented data science professional. He has a master's in predictive analytics from Northwestern University. And before Consensus, Eric worked at a sports entertainment company, DraftKings, which I think we all know, where he was an analytics specialist building predictive machine learning models to understand their user base better. He came up with the idea for Consensus after spending years as a diehard amateur science consumer and wanting access to better evidence-based information at the click of a button. And Eric was formerly a 3-year starter for the Northwestern University football team, is an avid skier, loves the outdoors, and hopes to convince NFL coaches someday never to punt again. So welcome, Eric, to the Pilates Goddess podcast.
Thank you so much, Lynda. Very, very happy to be there and appreciate the warm introduction.
I love doing intros. I love hearing it. I love it. I love hearing my own intros. It's always like, wow.
It's always a good feeling to gas people up. There's not much better feeling than giving compliments and giving people a warm introduction.
Oh, yes. Now, talk to me a little bit real quick about your move from kind of sports to science.
Yeah. So it definitely goes back to my family roots. I was a jock amongst a family of academics and scientists. Everyone my parents met at an MIT lab. My sister is a lifelong teacher. My dad's dad is a tenured professor. So I was, entrenched, had an interest in and entrenched in science my whole life. I just happened to be very large and somewhat athletic and have the ability to play sports at a high level that helped me also further my education. So I've always been really interested in science, and basically it kind of, the idea for wanting to start Consensus came from being somebody who was really interested in science, had a family background in science, but had no background in science themselves. And basically feeling that same problem statement that you said before, that as a non-expert, getting information from actual empirical studies is incredibly difficult. There's no easy way to do it. And I wanted to build Consensus for myself. I felt the problem myself and was not satisfied with just Googling these questions that I knew there were people out there that had dedicated their lives to studying. I just didn't have access to that information. So it came from having a family background and interest in science and wanting to solve the problem for myself.
Which is actually where so many great ideas and great business models have come from. Actually, is when we're just like, wait, but I need that. Where is it? Yeah. Can I do that? Can I build that? Can I bring a team together to help with that? I also feel like, consensus kind of came in at a very good moment, right? Because, well, pre-internet, because I'm that old. So pre-internet, we kind of knew what the fake news and the fake science stuff was. That was easy to see. It was easy to discern. It was the rag magazines, at the checkout at the supermarket. There was not a lot of just random kind of fake news. You had to actively consume it, and look for it if you wanted it. You had to subscribe to physical newsletters that people were producing out of their homes. It was,
pick up a paper and actually pay for it, and
exactly, and have the other people in line watch you buying the National Enquirer or whatever rag you were, or the Star, right, or whatever rag you were buying. So, but now falsity is rampant. And we know it's rampant online. We know it's rampant in social media. All of the heads of all of the social media companies have, at varying times come out and said, yeah, there's nothing we can do about it.
Totally. Yeah. And I think you're exactly right. And that was a reason why what motivated me to work on it was when COVID happened. Because I had this idea 7 or 8 years ago. But a few things happened. And then it kind of had this idea like 7 or 8 years ago. I pitched it to a few friends. Most people thought I was a little crazy. Of like, what if there's a way that you could just type in a question, it could instantly pull out all the information from all the studies on it and get an answer. I was like, yeah, 8 years ago. And that wasn't even really about misinformation, because while it obviously was a problem back then, it just wasn't in the public zeitgeist as much as it is today. And that idea was just out of more like my personal curiosity and things, and seeing the value I got from like listening to a podcast with a scientist on it, or reading a book by a subject matter expert, and just being like, this is my favorite type of content. I learned so much from it, but like, I have to wait for them to create it. Like, what happens when I have my question? I want to just be able to ask it and search it. So that's how the initial idea came. But then when COVID happened, it became, extremely crystallized that everyone was going through a similar problem, and the ability to search for information and actually understand what the underlying data said was nearly impossible. And then, that combined with everything that happened in the years before, with all the issues we've seen with social media companies and search engines and all companies that run advertising-based models, and the information that can end up being produced downstream. But then there was a third thing, and I know maybe this isn't the perfect podcast to talk about that on, but then it also was these massive advancements in artificial intelligence that allow for synthesis across pieces of information and summarization of complicated text. Had taken a giant step forward about 2 years ago, and everybody's probably seen that with ChatGPT recently. But we used a similar underlying technology, and that technology was really invented a few years ago. And it was actually a friend of mine who called me up and was like, remember that idea you had? Like, you need to do that right now. It's like, one, it's now actually possible with the technology. And two, everyone in the world now is aware that this is a problem. And that's what inspired me to do it. So it was quite the, when you're starting a company, your why now story is very important. And I felt like it was too compelling of a why now story to not drop everything and do it.
Right. And I mean, in our talk before we started recording, right, I shared 2 different stories with you that were just ridiculously hard searches to do on standard search engines, and they shouldn't have been, right? One was simply wanting to know the clinically proven dose of tart cherry juice, right? Because I'm dealing with a left meniscus injury, and my body does not tolerate the pain meds well. So, my doctor was like, here is the encompassing list of what you can take that has been shown to work.
Yeah.
And on some things he had a dose. And then he hand wrote tart cherry juice. So I go on Google and I go on Bing and I'm like, okay, tart cherry juice dosage. And I'm getting like just ads from tart cherry juice companies and personal experiences of tart cherry juice and stuff from websites I've never heard of. And I'm like, I just want to know how much they drank, like, and what it did. And then I went on Consensus and I searched and I got, boom. I mean, there's only been 2 studies. It shouldn't be that hard to search, right? And the study came up and it was like, and that made me realize that I wanted to do the powdered capsule concentrate because I cannot drink 20 ounces of tart cherry juice a day.
I hear you.
Okay. But at least now I know that that's what I needed. And then I was able to easily look up what that was kind of milligrams wise in terms of the active ingredient, which then let me order the appropriate capsule, of.
And you found the data that showed you your doctor wasn't leading you astray. You found the underlying source material that said, hey, this is actually proven to work in some capacity.
Exactly. I mean, I assume that the head of sports medicine at Mount Sinai is not going to lead me astray, but it
you
could
needed
happen.
Further proof.
And sometimes we need proof. Yeah. And then the second one that happened to me, very recently was in a professional Pilates teachers forum. And I've spoken about this on the podcast before because this one really irked me, was somebody asking about hot Pilates. She literally went into a Pilates studio. She's in Europe. It was 32 degrees in the studio, which is 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And she was like, what's the point? Like, I don't understand. I didn't feel great after the class. I mean, the thought of doing I have tried different kind of hot yogas and whatever, don't love it. But the thought of doing that now, like after COVID with all the sweat and I can't even think about doing that. But she went and didn't get it. And instead of giving her appropriate information, like, actually, there's no reason to do that. That's extreme heat, which was my answer. Instead, people were just like, heat's good for you. Heat's good for your muscles. Your muscles work better in heat. And actually, if you Google, do your muscles work better in heat? You can find pages and pages of supporting bullshit to tell you that they do. Now, so in some of those articles, all they mean is 70 degrees as opposed to 50.
Yeah.
Right. And I just said, look, unless you're an endurance athlete, like you're going to play in the World Cup in Qatar, then you might need some extreme heat training because your body's going to have to do that. But for most of us, that's a strain that we don't need. And again, I went on Consensus.
Love it.
I did the search for exercising in extreme heat and do muscles work better in heat, and came up with all of the supporting evidence that no, they don't. And that unless you're training to work in extreme conditions, you don't need to train in extreme conditions. It's just unnecessary, and the negative consequences can be much worse.
Yeah, those are two great use cases, and those are two down the middle of the fairway questions that undoubtedly will have peer-reviewed studies that have looked to address them. And I think especially that tart cherry use case is just like perfectly encapsulating of the problem we're trying to solve. Google is amazing at many things, and it should be used for certain things. If you want to know what is the cheapest flight to go get to Orlando right now, like, you shouldn't type that on Consensus. You should go to Google to do that. They're designed to do that, and they're going to do it really well. Or best places to eat in Sorrento, Italy. Like, type that into Google. Like, that's what it's designed for. But I think what people sometimes don't realize is, because it is an advertising business, it's the reason why it's free. And because of that, their main objective is to drive engagement to sell more ads. Their main objective is not to give you the best information. And that results in many things. It basically turns it into a popularity algorithm, not a reputability algorithm. And it also results in sometimes just ads being shown to you, because that's how they make money. Is if you're searching for tart cherry juice, somebody will have paid quite a bit of money to rank for that query so they can then sell you tart cherry juice. That is how Google makes money. And there isn't anything inherently wrong with it. This isn't some giant evil conspiracy. Like, there's a perfectly legitimate business model and it can do many things great. But what it can't do then is be prioritizing delivering you rigorous information. It is not designed to do that. It's not designed to do deep research for. So what we're trying to do is basically steal that type of query, that type of question from Google. Type in your flight question or your best places to eat or what is the weather tomorrow. Keep typing that into Google. There's nothing wrong with that. They'll give you good information there. But if you're trying to go deeper, you're using a search engine that isn't designed to do that for you. And like, want to just be like, yeah, very clear that like, this isn't some giant conspiracy. There aren't people in a back room of Google with suits on saying like, how are we going to misinform Lynda? It's not what they're doing. It just is a giant advertising business, and the downstream effects of those incentives sometimes result in giving us bad information and not in their setup to not be designed to do certain things well for us.
Well, I feel like people don't really understand actually that social media companies and most search companies are advertising companies, and that's where they make their money.
Yep.
You remember, the Facebook memes that go around every once in a while where people are like, I hereby give Facebook notice to like not use my stuff. And I'm like, by typing that, just by virtue of typing that and posting, you have agreed to the Facebook terms and conditions. It doesn't matter what you say in that post. You're using it. You checked a box at some point that agreed to their terms and conditions. And part of that is they're using your data and selling your data. That's what they do. Yeah, and that's why you have the ability to, run your entire business in a way on Facebook for free.
Via Facebook ads. Yeah. It's been a secret reason for so many businesses growing, is because just of how good of targeted data these media companies, these social media companies have, that if you buy Facebook ads or Google ads, your ads are going to be so well targeted. And they're going to be the tart cherry juice example again. If you are a tart cherry juice company, you can use Google to guarantee that you are only showing ads to people who are actively looking something up about tart cherry juice. That's incredibly powerful. That's also why it costs quite a bit of money to run those ads. And then that also is why Google's a multi-billion dollar business, and why Facebook's a multi-billion dollar business, because they have such rich data profiles on all of us that they can be so targeted with their advertisements. So that makes the advertising space so valuable, and they can charge a premium for it. And it's why you feel like your phone is listening to you. It's not, it's just, they already knew all the things you were going to say anyway, because they have all this rich data about you. Again, and that goes back to my same point that it's not some giant conspiracy. When you get that perfectly targeted Instagram ad, it isn't because they just listened to your conversation about it. It's because they already knew all those things that you said in that conversation about you and what your interests were and what you cared about. So they were able to perfectly target it. And then you just remember that you said something the day before, and then it was confirmation bias. But it's almost scarier that they're not listening, that they're able to show such targeted ads, because they have such rich data profiles.
Exactly.
And again, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, and they're not doing it to be evil and deceive us. It's just the way advertising businesses work, and that's the way that with high-tech solutions and high-tech data, that's what the downstream effects become.
Right. And you did that kind of data analysis, right, when you were at DraftKings, so well.
Oh yeah. And that's not even close to the amount of the difference of getting data on how you act. Picking fantasy teams is not nearly as rich to learn about the underlying person as when I checked in at Starbucks in Seattle, and I posted these pictures of my friends here, and I watched this video for 10 minutes and that one for 4 minutes and that one for 3 minutes. You stack enough of that up with some algorithms doing some data analysis, you can build a perfect digital avatar of who you are, what you like, what you don't like, what you might be interested, when you might be interested in it. And then that's why we think our phones listen to us. Nope, it's just really precise data and really good algorithms.
So who's using consensus?
Great question. It fits into three main buckets. So the biggest bucket is somebody like yourself and somebody like me, who is, not necessarily a hardened researcher, but understands that there's better data out there, and they're primarily looking it up for personal health questions. So you have people like me who are looking up, what supplements work and what morning routine should I have and how should I optimize my sleep, and all those types of questions that you pop into Google once a week when you hear about some miracle supplement or some miracle routine. That is just a core use case. We have a ton of users doing that. We have another bucket that is just students, which makes total sense. We're creating easier access to peer-reviewed studies. You many times need to have peer-reviewed studies in your work, the papers you're writing. We made it a little bit easier for those people to access that. So we have a lot of students. We have about 250 universities represented in our user base so far.
Oh, great.
The last one is a bucket of people who use it in work at some capacity across a variety of use cases. We have doctors using it. So when your doctor created you that list, some of that's going to come from just their knowledge of things, but they're not experts on everything. And how do you think they figure out what works? They look up the studies themselves. And, we've created a tool that hopefully makes that a little bit easier. So a doctor creating that list for you, we have doctors basically using consensus to help them create that list, to tell the patients, here's what's actually been shown to work for your specific condition. So doctors, we have healthcare consultants. Another interesting use case and the people using it for work has been content creators. So people who write, people who write maybe things on, somebody has a Pilates blog and they want to, include studies that say that you should do this and not that. And it's, we've created a way, hopefully, to make that a little bit easier to find that information. So people who are sharing information with people creating content have really liked the product as well. So 3 main buckets.
And then, what I find too in consensus is that it feels very natural.
We hope.
It kind of, right?
Yeah, that is we're not the first search engine to exist that has only studies in it. Google Scholar exists.
Right.
But the problem is they haven't paid attention to that product in 20 years, and it's impossible to use. It just delivers you a list of blue links. You have to just hack together keywords in a very specific way to get anything that's relevant. So our insight was, why isn't there something that exists that takes that source content, but then does some of the ease of use things that are why we've all fallen in love with Google in some way? We've crapped on Google a little bit, but don't get me wrong, it's still a great product, and they've done a million things well, and it's so easy to search. It's natural language. They help autocorrect. They'll pull you out the featured snippet sometimes. And I was like, well, why can't we mix those together? And why can't we take some of this ease of use of the search engines we all use and marry it with better underlying source content? So hearing you say that it felt natural and intuitive is music to my ears.
Yeah. And I think that, if we kind of go back and, this episode might get flagged with those little COVID messages, but but I'm fine with that. But I even had good friends at the beginning of COVID who were getting convinced by the anti-vaccine studies, who were getting, convinced that about ivermectin and just all of the kind of stuff that was out there. And they would send me links.
Yeah.
Right. And I would follow these links, and for some of those, literally all you needed to do was Google the guy's name.
Yeah.
And see, what his or her actual standing was in the medical community.
Disbarred or something like that, right?
Exactly. Or no longer licensed, or licensed but no longer practicing because they've been banned in so many places.
Right.
And, just giving out medical advice for fun and profit. And that really scared me. What really scared me then was when I started to see people who I respected, people who I knew were smart, who I knew could discern, who were still kind of getting drawn in, by these studies. And I was like, the fact that we I'm 56 now, the fact that I'm walking around, and I've never had measles, and I've never had, mumps, and I've
Take it for
never
granted.
had polio. My mother had polio.
Yeah.
My mother was one of the miracle cases that survived polio with, with fewer effects.
If you look at
later
any
in
of
her
those
life.
graphs of cases worldwide, it's like, well, we did something pretty amazing here.
Exactly. And to kind of stem COVID really the way we did so quickly. I mean, and it was quick. Like, it didn't feel quick while it was happening.
Right. If you zoom out. Yeah.
But if you zoom out, it was fast. And I remember I just kept thinking, wouldn't it be great if there was just a place where I could send them and just be like, just type it in here.
Yep.
And see what comes up. And you have built that place.
To work on it. Yeah. And, it's a great point too, because some of that came out are studies. And, we're saying we have this gate kept source of data that's all peer reviewed research, but not all research is quality research. Now, the good news for us is some of those things you talked about probably wouldn't even meet the standard of being peer reviewed if it truly was a disbarred practitioner. So like it probably wouldn't hopefully make its way into a product, but the ivermectin is actually a more compelling example, because there is real research that showed that it was effective in like very certain contexts. And then there was much more in-depth research that ended up being done that basically said it's not really true. But there are truly actual studies out there that showed that it might actually be helpful or might actually be effective. So it's an interesting case of like that is like the second layer of problem. There's the really easy ones where it's like, no, our vaccine's effective. Like anything that's reputable will say yes. And, if we type into consensus, you'll get universally positive things. But then there's the second layer of well, are these more complicated questions that do have some legitimate research backing them up, but it requires that, actually finding the most comprehensive research, the least biased, with proper funding sources, properly designed from the subject matter experts that looked across all the studies ever and then came to conclusion. And like the ivermectin ones basically say like, you shouldn't take it for COVID. But point is that is like what we're trying to solve now is like, how do we get to that second level of parsing through more quality research and what are these sources of truth across the research? And if you use the product now, we have some tags that say these are more likely to be rigorous journals. These are really highly cited papers. We're about to release one hopefully later this week that says this study was designed this way versus that way, which is an indicator of quality. And I think the next step for us is really trying to kind of synthesize those together to help somebody who's searching say, okay, here's these 10 studies. 3 of these said ivermectin actually could be good for COVID. 7 said that it isn't. What should I actually trust? And there's that next layer of, okay, well, here are the papers that are likely the most important about this question. And that's what we're trying to work on right now. And ivermectin is a perfect example because there is perfectly reasonable research that says it might be effective. And that's what came out right when COVID started. So those people weren't crazy when they found those. Those actually really did exist and they were pretty reputable. It's just when it then started to be looked at a little bit deeper and a little more comprehensively, the subject matter experts now don't believe it should be taken. So cut those people some slack if that's all they sent you. Vaccine deniers don't deserve as much slack because the research is pretty universal on that one. But you can cut
I don't give the deniers any slack.
But if they were sending you ivermectin information, they weren't crazy. They should be convinced now that it's wrong because there's really good research that you shouldn't have taken it for COVID. You probably shouldn't take it for COVID, but they weren't crazy.
Well, that's good to know. And I did kind of know that. It's so important to make scientific research accessible. And I feel like in the fitness and Pilates world in particular, this becomes very important. I don't know if you've seen over the past several months, the Washington Post has done a host of articles on professional bodybuilding. And it's been very interesting because they've been talking a lot about the coaching in professional bodybuilding, specifically for women. But it's also the same for men. And the amount of just crap that coaches are encouraging their clients to inject, to take, to, stuff that's coming from South America, stuff that's, not legal always in the US or legal for the specific use, so that, people, so that they basically can dehydrate and gain a little bit more muscle definition for competition.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm reading these, I'm thinking any of these people had to do, if they had something like consensus, was just go in and type in these things.
Totally.
And then they would have seen the lists of the studies showing, people dying and this not maybe being indicated and all of this, but it didn't exist. Right. So still now, I mean, if I could type in, something about weight loss and hydration, and I'm still on Google getting served, articles about Victoria's Secret angels, drinking Epsom salts before the big show. As if that was somehow inappropriate,
Well, again, think about what they're optimizing for. They're optimizing for engagement, and their algorithm says, "Ooh, this is the article that people have clicked on, so I'm going to show this."
Right. And that's really what it becomes about, right? That's the ranking of what we search for in any of the standard search engines simply has to do with advertising and how many other people clicked on the article.
Which those aren't separate things either, because the reason why they care about how many people click on the article is because they want to show ads. Because if you're continuing to engage, you have more time to show more ads and make more money. So again, that's when that is your North Star. You care about engagement and what people are going to click on. You don't care about what is right and what is wrong.
So basically you end up getting served the National Enquirer and the Star stuff
if that's what's engaging and what is popular, that's why that was the big problem like Facebook had with serving up like conspiracy videos. I think they've cleaned it up some, but again, they're selling ads. Like that is what they make money on.
Right.
And you sell more ads if people are more engaged. And the algorithms basically, again, these weren't people making decisions. These were the algorithms learning. What was Lynda likely to click on? Oh, people are really clicking on this video that says all this nonsense. Okay, let's show that. They don't vet that it's nonsense or not. They just see the engagement and predict likelihood of engagement. And they say, oh, this is it. And then it gets fed to you. And many times, that isn't what you'd like to be looking for, especially if you're looking up health related things. If you're looking up the hydration and weight loss, you probably don't, your goal isn't to learn about some clickbaity story about Victoria's Secret models, but there's a lot of people out there that have clicked on that and found that engaging. So then Lynda gets it when you're trying to learn what the actual effects are.
Right. And which has nothing to do with science and everything to do with popular culture and advertising. I mean, it's like candy.
Fair way to describe it.
Yeah. And when I think back to kind of the old school supermarket, well, all of the checkouts are actually still the same, right? You check out at Whole Foods, you're getting served more kind of holistic magazines, right? And there's still candy there. It's just, sweetened,
packaged a little differently,
and packaged differently. Exactly. It's still the same. It's still candy and magazines right before you check out. I walk into Walgreens, you check out, wall of candy, magazines. It's always the same. And I think we forget that the online space is a sales
that on steroids.
Space.
Yeah, it's that. It's
exactly.
Just that amplified by a million.
And that's where, I mean, even in my own business,
it's a really great analogy.
Yeah, I struggle with like the upsell and all of that kind of at the end of the shopping cart, because it makes me feel like I'm just serving them the candy now. Like I'm trying to just get them to buy that last Snickers bar before.
I mean, it's a powerful, like, for better and for worse. And it's not always, again, this isn't like, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's just, you just have to be aware of it to like be able to navigate it better. For better and for worse, it's an extremely effective way to run businesses. Like it's effectively like hacking psychology. And like you're saying it right there. And like, if you do it well, you probably will make more money. But again, it's a trade-off of what you feel is the right way to, quote unquote, manipulate people in some ways. But because sales is manipulation at the end of the
Right.
day.
It is.
That you
That's
can hopefully
what
be giving them a
sales
good
is.
product. So then that's how you can justify it if you're really delivering them real value. But, all decisions are made through psychology in some way.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same way how when you walk into even Whole Foods now, you walk into produce and then produce is immediately followed by the bakery. And I feel like it's that, oh, I just did the good thing and I got all the
So when these people come out of that, then they're more likely to be feeling good about themselves. And, oh, I can get a cinnamon roll.
And they'll get some cookies, right? It makes sense. It all works. And thousands of hours and millions of dollars have been spent on getting that design down.
There's a famous business quote it's super simple. Just show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. Or show me the incentives and you understand everything. And like, you kind of realize the whole world is set up that way in some way. And again, it's not like, it isn't inherently wrong or right. It isn't a conspiracy theory. It's just, people follow their incentives, and their incentives when they're running businesses is to make money. And the best ways to make money sometimes are to, think about the psychology of the customer and try to tap into that for better or for worse.
Yeah. I mean, even pre-internet, we all did the same thing with the coupon value packs, and
right. Just on a much smaller scale and not in your face 24/7. And that's now why we're running into problems.
Exactly. And that's the issue now, is that it's all advertising all the time. Yeah. Whereas before there was a little bit of control of that. Exactly. You could throw out the coupon mailer. You could not open the thing. You could avoid, those situations. But I think that, the work that you're doing is so important. And it's really crucial that people have access to this kind of data. That for most of us, you'd have to just comb through kind of pages and pages and pages of bullshit to get to the kind of little nuggets of data here and there, and then not always even have access to it because it's behind a paywall or it's behind a science journal, or you have to be affiliated with a certain thing. What I find in consensus is that you just get the piece that you need. You can read the study and you can go about your day. It's not a whole hunt and peck situation.
But we hope. We definitely haven't, for certain queries, we do it really, really well because there's tons of studies on it. And then other ones, we still need to continue to get better and better. And, we're young and learning and hopefully getting better every day. But what you just described is the problem we hope to solve. We hope to make it easier to get better information directly from people who have dedicated their lives to empirically studying the questions that we all have. Because you shouldn't be getting it from somebody who editorializes a blog, when there are people out there who have literally spent 30 years of their life studying one question. And you could go right to them, or you could have the, Vanity Fair person write an article on their behalf.
Right. Exactly. So Eric, how can people get in touch with you? What's the best place for them to reach you if they want to get in touch?
I'd say follow us on Twitter at Consensus NLP. NLP stands for natural language processing. It's the technology we use. So at Consensus NLP, I run that account. DMs are open. Tweet at us, follow us, DM me. And then definitely check us out at consensus.app. You can come create a free account today and search, and hopefully we can chip away at the problems that we talked about today. We're not going to, no way we can solve all of them, but hopefully we can be chipping away at them a little bit and present an outlet to be getting better information.
Great. And be, part of the solution instead of just the continued problems.
We hope so.
So all of the links will be in the show notes. So you guys can try Consensus, get in touch with Eric, and kind of see what's going on in this space, because it is really important. And again, for the Pilates teachers listening, if you're looking for studies on movement, for actual studies on extreme heat exercise and other things, Consensus is really the place to go. So
Love it.
thank you, Eric, so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I hope we get a whole batch of new customers that are Pilates instructors, and we can make it a little more evidence based.
Fabulous. I look forward to that. I do.
Awesome.
So everybody, thank you so much for listening once again. And I would love it if you love the podcast, if you would go over to the Apple Podcasts app or Spotify or Podchaser and leave a rating and review. And I will see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Music brought to you by Nerd Salad. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, especially if you liked it. And please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks.